Thank you for joining us on your Thursday night as we discuss everything from job seeker to leveling up in your career to maybe some different leadership styles. So if you've been with us, you know that we've discussed everything from pitch anything to extreme ownership. And I'm really excited because we're going to discuss a book by one of my favorite authors, John C. Maxwell, How Successful People Think. Now, if you're joining us from the invite, you know that a lot of industry leaders also use John C. Maxwell for coaching and reference. So we're very excited. And here with me tonight is Sophia and Harold. Harold, Sophia, please introduce yourselves and let's have a great chat.
Hey, it's great to be here tonight. Harold Strong. I'm in North Texas. I'm President, CEO of the Medical Innovation Collaborative.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm actually in Connecticut right now. I am a senior studying in New York City, and I am also happy to be here to discuss the new book for this month.
Excellent. We're so thrilled to have both of you. So I know that there's a lot going on in everyone's world right now. So if you're tuning in, this is going to be a very low-key conversation, right? We structure this conversation and every conversation so that even if you didn't read the book, you can chime in. We want to hear from you. If you comment in the YouTube live, we're going to see your comments faster than if you comment in the Facebook stream or on the LinkedIn. There's a slight delay. So if you want to comment, share anything, maybe you have some really exciting news, maybe you accepted an offer this week and would like to comment, we're thrilled and here to cheer you on. And any comment that comes through will flash across the screen so that the three of us can discuss it. So we are shy Mike Minoshki tonight. There's nothing wrong. He had a prior commitment. He'll be back with us next week. So I'm going to be playing the part of moderator with kind of like lots of octopus arms over here, right? And panelists sharing ideas, which anyone who knows me knows I'm not short of an idea ever. So when we were looking at this book, and it's a small book, but it's small and mighty, right? So I really think that the first 5 chapters of this are so important. You know, big picture thinking, engage in focused thinking, harness creative thinking, realistic thinking, and strategic thinking. And if you're a job seeker, if you're a leader, if you're potentially looking to level up in your career, there's something in here for everyone. And when I think about big picture thinking, you know, Harold, you really come to mind because I would love to know how in your career from, you know, being a corporate executive, also an entrepreneur, how have you used big picture thinking to lead, right? How have you learned continuously? How have you intentionally listened? How have you looked expansively? And then I think there's a really important piece here that we're probably all struggling with in the pandemic, and that how have you and do you still live completely?
All good questions. So when you are first graduating from college, and Sophia is right on the eve of that probably, you are sitting with the rest of the minions as you listen to leadership define goals, objectives, next steps. And that's kind of how you decide where you want to be as a professional. How do you want to engage with the company? How far do you want to go with the company? Are you in line with the objectives, the goals that have been communicated? From my perspective, the big picture thinking comes from working with a lot of people who have diverse views. There may be some who just don't get it, and some that are 3 or 4 steps ahead. And invariably, when you're bouncing among these people. So being able to communicate where one person may not get the concept, or to listen to someone who has the concept down and understanding how they communicate with people, as well as your managers, your directors, your VPs, as you look up the line. What key skill sets do they present that you really want to embody? How do they communicate to people? How do they get to where they are? And how do I do that? And invariably, it's communication. So being able to communicate to a host of different people, being able to communicate in ways that may not be so obvious, that's important. You have to base it on some foundation, but you have to create an image in their head a roadmap that they can see from 30,000 feet. As they become more grounded, they know exactly where they are. So like we can start the conversation there. I'd be interested in your thoughts because you've been around a little bit and you've worked with people, and HR is a challenging kind of a topic, right? Not everybody understands it. So big picture thinking and then narrowing them down to that target. How would you address that?
You know, for me, I think it's grown, right? You know, it's kind of when you're an analyst, you think like an analyst, and then when you're a manager, you think like a manager, and then so on and so forth, right? I've found that trying to create the picture out of thin air is actually very hard. And to the point you made, Harold, kind of double clicking on, you know, people like things that they can grasp onto or they already know. So I've found that if I can extrapolate a piece here, there, someone else, pull it together, people tend to get on board with that big picture thinking. I think far too often we think that big picture thinking has to be strategic, right? Or we glamorize the word strategy and we feel like we're so tactical, we're not strategic. I think that when you put essentially one foot in front of the other, have those conversations, and to the point you made, you know, presenting yourself to people in a way that they understand, and or, you know, the soft, subtle communication, right? Maybe you let others speak because you're in agreement.
Leading from behind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, from an entrepreneurship perspective, I've had a chance to work with several people who are entrepreneurs. The challenge that they have is they can never start a conversation with, this has never been done before. This is brand new. I'm bringing this. That's usually the first sign to run. So you usually have to present it in such a way, the big picture, to give comfort and landmarks. It's similar to this, but slightly different. So you kind of triangulate. Now we can have a conversation. Now that you know that I'm not trying to sell you yet another bridge, or we're not trying to boil the ocean. Instead, here's the specific concept that we want to talk about. But then it moves on to other. It's almost like kung fu or karate. You got different levels that you bring out when you need it, and you only use it when you need it. Right? Don't bring out everything.
Right. Well, you're going to scare people away that may be good allies, right? Because if every idea sounds like an MLM pitch, you're probably not going to get too many pitches across, right? Or thoughts. You know, the point made, you've never heard anything like this before, and it's like, but we have.
Oh, look, I got to go.
Right, right. But we have. You know, I'm really curious, Sophia, how you have yourself balanced and then encouraged others. You know, when you think about the staying engaged, right? Engaged in focused thinking. And the reason why I think it's so important, and obviously, you know, you're in that pivotal time in your life. You're soon to transition from student to, you know, full employment in the workforce, but being engaged right now in anything is very difficult because there's so many things that are distracting and that are big distractions. How have you, you know, managed that? How do you acknowledge your distractions? What are things that you do to kind of declutter your mind?
I think, you know, that's a big question, especially now being home and taking my classes online. I'm always using my technology, whether it be on my computer or my phone. And so even in my internship, it's all social media. So how do I find that balance is an amazing question. And I'm not even sure if I can fully answer that to the best of my knowledge. But at the same time, I think for myself, I'm a learning professional, and being able to use lists to my advantage, whether that be big picture lists, but also week by week. And that's kind of the strategy that I've been using to balance my technology and work, but also to limit my distractions, knowing that, all right, well, let's put my computer away. And if it's something I can physically write down, use my notepad. This book has helped me realize that that is a positive way to think big and to kind of put away my distractions. However, I'd love to hear both of your guys' perspectives on how an individual like myself who is entering the force might be able to limit their distractions, or what advice that you would give to someone like myself who even works in technology? I know, Cynthia, you work at home, and that's kind of a difficult combination to have, and what advice you might be able to give.
I'm going to kick it to Harold first, and then I'm happy to sum it up, because as we said, like, I'm never shy in opinion or a perspective on things that have worked or not worked, right? Especially when all of this kind of forced work from home started. But Harold, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, because you've had so many interesting career avenues in your life, and from being, because I think a lot of times people think, corporate executive, you're in an office, and that's true, but you are also in the field with your customers. But that didn't decrease the requirement for you to respond. How did you manage distractions with that, especially when technology was really ramping at that time, and any travel that you had? I mean, when you're in a different time zone in another country, how do you keep up with that?
Yeah, it's kind of a challenge. And Sophie, I think part of your question will be answered as we go through this conversation tonight, because if I guess it was in the creative, realistic thought piece, you're young, so you can kind of experiment and learn some other things, kind of learn as you go. But as you become more strategic, you kind of focus in on that specific opportunity, interest, job that you really focused in on. So you kind of narrow it down. You no longer become a generalist. You become kind of a specialist in a couple of things. But that will develop over time. But in terms of moving from staff to management to director to VP, those are some challenging steps. Fortunately, you get a little bit of time between each to kind of get comfortable in the seat and the new responsibilities. So I'm moving from being transactional to being creative or operational, and changing those thoughts can be a challenge. Wished I had this book at the time, because while it's, to your point, it's very simple but very bindy in terms of just throwing out some ideas that are just basic ideas. Everybody can cook something, but every now and then a menu is helpful to keep you focused on your efforts. Similarly, as you're doing something that's just executional, you follow instructions, you communicate, you do your write-ups, and then you're very responsive. As you do that, and they can demonstrate leadership along that way, and that was my opportunity. How do I demonstrate leadership in each role that I have, regardless of the position? That helped me to advance in the areas. The challenge is when you're changing industries, because the measurement tools, the interactions, the responsibilities, obviously, are going to be different depending upon, selling soap is different than managing the compensation for sales reps for Nike, which is different from managing, a $500 million real estate project that you're doing on a university campus. The key component of all that is the planning component of it, the communication component of it, of course. And I know this isn't fireside chat time, but the stream that goes along through that is keeping it simple, ownership, communication, right? So I could talk a long time about that, because it's a huge question, but a fun question to answer. But the key piece is taking your time, learning as you go, creating those experiences, building your network, communication, and the other two would be communication and communication.
That's a lot to try and,
right?
Follow up on, right? Harold Strong's bringing it tonight.
Right. Stand back.
What was the song by Stevie Nicks? Stand back, stand back.
Look out! Look
out!
Right,
I'm sitting live. Okay. Cauliflower is a pizza crust. It's a whole new world. Okay.
See,
it's a whole new.
That's what we need to do each week.
We just ticked up 2 viewers. Apparently, we do. So back to your question, though, Sophia, you were asking from like my perspective, how you stay focused at the role you. And there's something in here that when Maxwell is taking us through, how you stay focused, how you think, he talks about discovering your gifts. And my gift has never been last minute. My gift has always been in preparation. And that's not really glamorized. That's not really sexy. That's not really sought after, right? Because everyone thinks they're going to be like that last minute, that they just crammed 16 chapters before the final and they threw the PowerPoint presentation before they, went before the board and it was fine. Rarely is that actually successful. I think that knowing your gifts early are so important. And so for me, knowing that I'm not a last minuter, right? I wasn't a last minute as a student, and I have not been a last minute as a professional and then, executive and leader, identifying that early and communicating that to people early. Hey, we've got X deliverable. All right, I need to get on your calendar here. We need to talk about Z. This is how, my perspective on how it should go. Here's the mini deliverable. For a long time, I kind of held back and felt, I'm not gonna say ashamed, but it's not as cool as, people who can just pull it off the drop of the hat. Now I'm very out front with it. I really want to understand. I want to make sure that this is what you're looking for as well. Let's prep and plan early. And most people like that. And back on, to what Harold was saying, your network and connection, I think that also identifying your gifts, in bringing people together and supporting other people. Sometimes your gifts don't have to be physical things that you give, but more your presence and, helping someone else and in their path, I think can be really important as far as being focused. Because I find that the more I've given to others, the more focused I've become on what my path is. Less, to Harold's point, less generalist, more specialist. But going through this, right? So he kind of takes us on this journey, right? We're going to be focused. We're going to be creative. We're going to be realistic. I'd love to know what both of you think are strengths in creative thinking. Sophia, with your specialty in social media from a broadcasting standpoint, Harold, being an entrepreneur requires depths of creativity, right? Where we were talking about how, you don't want the pitch to be an MLM chat, but you still have to be creative because you're always trying to meet a client need in some type of specialty. And I really think that this is the piece for our leadership viewers. How are you still big picture, focused, yet creative? Because I think some of our brains, we process that those two things can't live together. You can't be focused and creative, what actually you can. How do you pull that off? Harold, I'd love to hear from you. And then Sophia, please tell me.
Creative is fun, but it's absolutely exhausting in terms of trying to assess what the resources are you can play with, what budget you have, not just in money, but in time and in materials, and the capacity of the team that you're working with. Because it takes time to kind of communicate, okay, here's the plan, go with me on this. And it's like, yeah, so no. So now we have to do the selling job. That's important, the features, benefits, all that kind of thing. And so being creative individually is kind of fun. You come up with scenarios, kind of go from there. Eventually gravity takes hold and it's due at a certain date. It's got to be done. So working with a group of people, giving them room to be comfortable, giving them, while we do have to do things on time, we don't have to be rushed. If we are rushed, we make it part of the campaign, right? So maybe and maybe I've been in a couple of these scenarios. I need 5 ideas before we finish our drink. So drink up. And so that starts the whole conversation around here's how we can attack this project. And usually creative thinking comes in, at least in some situations, when you don't have enough money to cover it. Here's the budget we have. Here's what they're asking for. We got to make some magic happen here. So you're being creative in that area, right? So we want to deliver a product on time, under budget, with the budget we've got, and it needs to hit the point. So being able to understand who the customer is or what the project is, what your resources are, or in case of if you're just taking some time off and you need to kind of look at your career, what is this what I want to do? You know, Myers-Briggs is a good way of doing that, but you also kind of want to do a self-inventory of, okay, so what's next? If we put a DE&I lens on it, if I can throw that in, oftentimes you are reversing the picture. You are suggesting, or this is the hiring manager. What do I have to say to him to give him comfort that I am the guy, person for this job? And I need to attract, define, and then focus him down to a realistic kind of thought process. But first I have to attract his attention. I have to give him a scenario that would be reasonable. So you're constantly pivoting and looking at how you can direct and attract and define yourself and secure the position that you're interviewing for. So those are some of the things that I thought about when I was reading the book. First, from a departmental perspective, how do you do more with, but more, if I'm looking for a job, how do I tell this manager, the hiring team and committee, I'm the guy, and here are the reasons why, and being creative with that, because in many cases, that's important.
Agreed. And I definitely want to double click on the creative piece. But Sophia, please tell me your thoughts on this as far as how you've wrangled it given the ever, changing social media landscape.
Well, I think that a lot of points that Harold made definitely transition into the media and journalism, broadcasting world. And I do think that what Maxwell says on page 26, he has this little diagram: think, collect, create, correct, connect. And that just goes so well with the whole idea of specifically creating content. You have to be so creative in the media industry because you don't want to be identical to anyone else. You want your content to be unique and to really showcase exactly what you're trying to demonstrate to your viewers, to your followers. And so creativity, and what Maxwell says in this book, is exactly that. What you put out your first post, you're going to get back. You're going to be able to see those analytics to tell, all right, well, it didn't hit the target demographic that I was looking for, but your next post is going to be another test, and you can keep creating this new content that is just going to really target exactly what you're looking for in that professional sphere for media and journalism. Broadcasting is a little bit different, but in the same sense, the creativity is really necessary for this industry.
Harold, can you and I double click on something for a second? Because I think there's an important piece here in creativity and how, so if we shift the conversation a little bit, so let's say I'm a job seeker and I'm looking to present myself. How do I combine creativity with authenticity? Because perhaps my background doesn't match the background of who I'm interviewing with. Perhaps I'm a diverse candidate. Maybe my family experiences, when everyone's telling stories, aren't what your family experiences are, and vice versa. How do I successfully blend creativity with authenticity?
It's a good question. If I'm a job seeker and I'm combining those two, I've prepared for the position. I know who the company is. I know who their customers are. I have an idea of where the department fits in the mission of securing and satisfying customers. So that would be a parameter that I would present my creativity to the hiring managers. Point, okay, so how do I fit? What's my cultural fit with? And so this gets back to the first the that we reviewed. We don't want to go too far out on a ledge because you're inviting yourself out of the competition at that point. But at the same time, you want to look at things that are from a different perspective, but adds value. It's all about value. It's not about allowing me to fly my flag wherever and whenever I want. That's not the objective. I can be very creative. I don't care. But if you can direct that creativity to a bottom line, and that bottom line can be efficient use of resources, funding, time, the department, a variety of different. How can I communicate that versus saying, I can do it. Give me an example of how you've done it. All right, I'll give that example, but I want to make certainly understand the texture, the experience around that. So I may become a little bit more descriptive. I may offer a little bit more detail. And that detail may include how I look at data differently from others. So we have to stay grounded within our parameters. But to your point, that's both creative in the way we present it. It shows personality, exposes our culture, allows them to see who we are. And it's realistic because it is something that's measurable, something that they can check by looking at the analytics of what I performed in the past.
I think that brings us to a great point that Maxwell talks about in the 4th chapter, employ realistic thinking, because I think there's that hinge, right? There's that pivot between you want to be creative, you want to present yourself in a really creative, desirable manner, and rightfully so, but also being very realistic. And when I was reading this, I was thinking, okay, how do I continuously straddle not only the presentation, right, of creative and gregarious, but also realistic as a job seeker, but then also from a mental health and self-care perspective, how do I realistically balance my expectations in this very permeable world? Job seekers now are accepting offers without ever physically meeting hiring managers, right? You're remote from very much of what we're doing right now, right? How do you set that realistic expectation when there's not really a clearly defined marker in the sand right now? Sophia, I'd love to hear from you as far as how you're staying in that realistic space, given your current projections and everything you're engaged in. And then Harold, how have you managed the reality of a lot of different situations?
That is really difficult because it's as much as live Zooms are fantastic and classes are fantastic online, there is an element that is missing from both education and that connection that you face with your professors and also your peers. So I definitely think that, like, moving forward, I would like to hope that for individuals exactly in my age and my college career, I don't think that it's going to have the biggest impact on their professional careers. But I think that individuals that are maybe in high school or even younger middle school, I would love to find out what kind of impact it's going to have on them, having that like different type of reality for at least a year of their life. But I think moving forward, I'd love to hear both of your perspectives on definitely how this change has impacted your world, and also from a standpoint of interviewing. How do you prepare for an interview that's going to be via Zoom? That's a totally different body language that you have to display to someone over the computer rather than an in-person. And I'd love to hear both of your perspectives on that.
I think from conversations and strategies that I've employed in this space, being really authentic and honest, right? I'll say before I get on a call, if you see the door open, it's the cat coming in. I think that when we first entered this, and this could be my personal hang up, but Sophia, I wonder if you feel this way as well. I think as women, we feel like we kind of have to justify, explain, excuse, apologize for everything that's happening, right, in our world, because there's so many things coming in. And so a lot of individuals that I've been working with and coaching us to just be your authentic self, right? No one really planned to work from home in the depth that we have. So just go into it saying, hey, this is what's going on. Like, I'm happy to have this conversation. I've got my, my son or my daughter or my nephew here, and you'll probably hear X, Y, Z. I think that as leaders, we have to really recognize that this work remote space, even with things changing from a medical standpoint, right? I don't foresee work remote going away. I think that there's lots of advantages that families are experiencing that I don't think, I mean, yes, there are disadvantages, but I don't think everyone's going to be willing to just chuck and return to the office and 60-hour weeks and never seeing their families for dinner. I think that there's going to be a balance. About 15 years ago at this point, Motorola rolled out a program where you only had to be in the office on Wednesday. Every other day was your choice. If you like to come in, great. If you didn't like to come in, you want to work remote, great. But any in-person meeting that you had to have would happen on that Wednesday. And the reason why they rolled this out is that when they looked at their internal data, they found that a majority of their workforce was either coming in late, having to leave early, maxing out, going over on PTO. They did an additional survey and found that there were multi-generational households. And they said, all right, if we say lots of flex time, one physical day in the office, how much more productive would our workforce be? Because these things still exist. It's not like your family demand stops. And we've seen that amplified with pandemic. It's not like these other things stop. It's just a different image. So I think for me in this remote space, it's recognizing that this will really always be around with us. And how do I lead and support through that? You know, telling people, do whatever is best for you. Right? There's not really a cut and dry, you know, we're used to coming into the office and you punch the clock and everyone sees you and have you. That's different. So let's find what works for you. I think has been best. But Harold, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it as well.
No, I think it's right. And I think I like Kate's comment online that she's constantly apologizing for when her dog barks. And that's, well, I moved to a different room because my dog took over my office. So I appreciate that. My challenge in this new world is I need to communicate physically. I need to kind of read the person. And in this, am I looking at your pictures or am I looking at my camera so it looks like I'm looking into your eyes, but then I can't see your reaction to what I'm saying. So, you know, it's just a constant chase. So aside from those small little pieces, I think what Cynthia said is right on point in terms of, I think this is going to be here for a minute. This isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. But this is no different than working with a company in Japan or in Germany because you don't see them. It's a phone call. It's a video conference. You just work out the time. And again, you're communicating very similarly with purpose, very clearly, very simply, so that you can ensure that they're understanding any issues that may happen with language or cultural or whatever the scenario is. So yeah, I think we're just going to have to get used to this. If there's not a lot of formality to this, unfortunately, the only way we can maintain formality is in the content and the way we present. The cool part is we can grab the screen anytime and pop up our slideshow that will define, as long as it does what you say it will do, to communicate in illustrative form, here are the points that we need to make, or here's a diagram, those kinds of things. So the communication tools are that much better. It's not like, okay, where's the computer, where's the clicker, and listen, it's all right here, right? So that's a wonderful thing. The bonus for Sophia, last point, the bonus for you, Sophia, is you are starting in this space. So, you know, all the things you've done, way better than me. Learning to ride a bike without crashing. The opportunity you're going to have in 18 months is, okay, now I have to leave the house and I have to go to the office. Where do I park? You know, just how does that work? It's really going to be interesting when we re-enter, some of us re-enter the office market again. It'll be fun.
I think too, Harold, there's an overlap here in, you know, we're talking about being realistic and creative. I think there's, though, a level of emotional intelligence that's going to be required going forward because the need paradigm has shifted. And also the competition, right? It's not so out of bounds now that roles will be remote. So that's really not going to be outside the question when people start saying, well, hey, I'd prefer, you know, this option. But when we kind of shift gears and say, we've thought big picture, we've thought creatively, we've thought, you know, we've been engaged, we've been realistic. right? And like we were talking about, as job seekers, as leaders, you thread that needle between, being realistic and also having lots of positive self-talk, right? That
Right.
realistically, you're not going to know everything. You're not going to know every outcome. You're preparing, right? And a throwback to a book we covered, in Extreme Ownership, you're owning outcomes, but be realistic and be kind to yourself that you're not going to know everything that happens.
Yeah.
But when we move into the strategic thinking space, right? And I feel like, Harold, this is the topic du jour that companies are trying to find and cultivate and bring speakers in and all kinds of things. When we move into strategic thinking, though, as a job seeker, how can any seeker, right? Let's say I'm watching this, I'm a job seeker. Maybe I'm currently employed, but I'm looking to do something different. I want to level up. My resume, which is my marketing tool, I read it. I think it's fine. It's great. But how can I be more strategic in that? Because let's be honest, that is the first layer. That's the first level of anything that you're going to do. How can someone, simplify things that are difficult about their resume, ask the right questions, right? Because when you think about it, you're really answering questions with that document, even though it's a one-sided conversation at that point. Customization, limiting margin for error. And what I really love here is he talks about the power to influence others. And when you're a job seeker, that's really what you're hoping to do. You're hoping to influence someone to have that first conversation with you. I'm curious. I want to chat. How do you process and recommend someone go through that?
Wow, that's a ton. Thank you for that. So if I'm going back to the book, I think part of the answer is strategic thinking is about assessing your risk. Positive, negative. What are my chances? How do I manage my expectations? Do I even want to pursue this job? What are they asking for? All right. So if they're asking for this, then let's see if I can make the resume look just like that. This kind of sounds like a really good conversation to have around the query campfire as well, in terms of keywords and those kinds of things. And we can talk about that a little later.
We can.
But
Tell me.
But the idea here says, here's why I'm interested in the job. Let's find some keywords, put in the resume that will make them aware through the screening that I'm that person for that role. Now that I'm in that process, now I have to go through strategic thinking on how I am going to present myself to help them understand, here are the ways I can help you mitigate your risk. Here's how we can reduce disappointment in the hire. Here are ways that we can move the needle that much faster, engage more, benefit more. So at a high level, that's how I would start answering that question. But beyond that, one has to be very professional and specific in the presentation that you make during the interview process. And that the questions that are answered need to be questions that you listen to and that you respond to. I don't think this is an opportunity to demonstrate that you are a candidate for a political character who can answer whatever question happens to be on my mind, although you didn't ask it. So if there are things I want to share, first answer their question and then tail into, I want to lead you down this path over here. If you don't mind, I think we'll have a much better conversation. But we have to be very, very succinct, very clear. It's a dialogue, it's a conversation, it's not a monologue. You want to ask them questions as much as they want to ask you questions. And I think the more questions you ask them, smart questions, as was written in the book, how do I know which questions are smart and which ones aren't? Well, go through the thinking process. So I recommend read the book. It's a challenge, but if you're serious about it, if you know, if you're moving from generalist to specialist, if you're maturing in your professional experiences, you've gone through that. And this is just an opportunity to demonstrate the thought process you've gone through.
Well, and I think too, double clicking on that, from a question perspective, for job seekers, a lot of it too is the ability you have to dialogue. Mm-hmm. right? You know, I've said to job seekers and clients of Query, you know, go in with your questions, absolutely, because part of questions is also preparation, and that you want to show that you're very interested and you've done the research that was available to you, but also be prepared that your questions can mold and change as you're having a conversation. That they're more of a jumping off point. They're not a hard and fast. And then within kind of the question and conversation space, you know, Sophia, how are you applying strategic thinking to a lot of your pursuits and passions that you're pursuing?
That's a great question. I mean, it's hard because you have to first, you know, outline exactly what, you know, your goals, desires are. And I think I'm still evolving through that, you know, exactly what profession do I want to pursue. And being able to strategically think around that is what this book has really been helping me try to find. And being able to assess my situation and say to myself, all right, well, if I am going to be applying to this job X, well, I need to have ABC in order to qualify for that job. Okay, well, now how do I get ABC? But I think overall, this book is really helping me to identify the skills that I need to be able to strategically think about my future, not only my professional future, but my future in general, even outside of my professional life. These are skills that I'll be able to take with me in professional relationships, non-professional relationships, and just my life in general as a young professional.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Makes sense. A lot of decisions to make, but at the same time, you know, you have to track those decisions to improve upon them next opportunity as iteration upon iteration. So yeah, it's exciting times.
Agreed.
I'm happy I'm not you.
I mean, it's, you know, like Harold said, it's an exciting time.
Yeah.
I share his sentiment. I'm glad I'm not a student either, because this would be kind of an interesting world to navigate. I think we should definitely put a pin in that and follow up on the navigation piece. I'd love to know, you know, when Mike joins us back next week, you know, when he was navigating the world in kind of the Vietnam era, like, and he mentioned in a conversation prior, this feels similar. Like, I would be curious because there was lots of uncertainty then, right?
Sure.
And no matter what, we're all dealing with a certain level of uncertainty. And so with that, I think we're at a great stopping point. There is one shout out that I want to give. Kate Stewart, who joined our conversation in the chat, she was recently promoted. And so I'm very, very thrilled for her in that. Always happy to see people, you know, achieving and really living their best life.
Congratulations.
So, I'm very, very happy for her. If anyone has any questions, if there's any comments, if you want to dive deeper on things that we talked about, please reach out. We're all happy to connect on LinkedIn. We're also happy to follow up on questions or comments that maybe you didn't get to post this week, but would like to post about next week. We really appreciate you being here with us. You can always replay this as many times as you would like. You can find it in the How Successful People Think playlist that's on 99pagesclub.com. When you go out to our YouTube channel, you'll see that great video of Rajiv rapping, and then you've got different playlists. It's very creative. Then you've got different playlists that you can watch and listen. So it's the month of November. There's a holiday in this month. So we're going to go live 3 times, and then you're going to see a great one-on-one interview that we're going to do with an author that I'm quite excited about. So thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Harold, for sharing all of your thoughts, your feedback, your tips. I know that everyone here, and myself included, is very grateful. Everyone stay safe. Have a great night, and we'll be back same bat time, same bat channel next week.